Hi, listeners. This is Chris Batts, your host of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. Season 1 is about to wrap up. Thank you, everyone who have made this season so fun and informative. Thank you, legal executives. Thank you, listeners. Speaking of legal executives, today I have the pleasure of speaking with the General Counsel of Buzzfeed. She is no stranger to the media industry and sensitive subjects. We discussed her new role, the Me Too movement, the notion of fake news, and mentoring young people. Lots of takeaways for everyone in this episode. Just a reminder, the PDF transcript of this audio is available to download. Go to liongrouprerecruiting.com/podcast. As many of you know, we interview corporate defense law firm leaders, partners, general counsel, and legal consultants. You are listening to episode 29 of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast.
Broadcasting from Kansas City, this is the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. In each episode, you'll receive actionable ideas and hear personal leadership stories of the top corporate defense law firms from around the United States. Enjoy a front row seat with law firm leaders, their partners, and legal consultants as we discuss life and leadership.
Welcome to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Batts with the Lion Group. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Rhonda Powell, General Counsel of Buzzfeed. Rhonda is no stranger to media and entertainment law. Prior to Buzzfeed, she was the Chief Legal Officer of Complex Media. She also worked in several roles for 12 years at Scripps Networks Interactive, which included leading a support team for Food Network and Cooking Channel. She started her career in corporate transactions at LaBeouf, Lamb, Green, and McRae, and Proskauer Rose, and received her JD from Michigan Law School. Welcome, Rhonda, to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. It's great to have you on the show.
So much, Chris. It's really, really exciting to be here. Looking forward to speaking with you.
So, Rhonda, you just made a recent move. Tell me about that. You left Complex and you're at Buzzfeed now. What led you to that transition?
Honestly, it was just the opportunity to really be at a company that I think really epitomizes what should and could happen on the digital platform. BuzzFeed's reach, BuzzFeed's connection, particularly with a younger generation of news consumers and content consumers generally, I found really, really intriguing. My kids visit BuzzFeed daily. They use BuzzFeed as their primary source of news. And I was just really interested in understanding from the inside what makes BuzzFeed tick.
That's excellent. Can you share with my audience your role as general counsel and more of your function, how you look at running a legal department, manage a team, that sort of thing? Share a little bit about your leadership style.
I will start by saying the group of lawyers and other legal professionals at BuzzFeed, tremendously talented, and I feel very privileged to be here to work with such a wonderful group. So my management style is fairly hands-off, I would say. I'm definitely not a micromanager. I'm very interested in not just getting the work done. Of course, that's the priority, but I'm also interested in how the work gets done, and I'm interested in enabling my team to get their work done, and also to follow up and follow through on any personal and developmental goals that they may have while they do it. So I like to think of myself more as a coach-style general counsel, where I'm there if you need me, and I will certainly provide direction and support, but I'm not going to be the person who's in there with you while you're at the plate trying to hit your home run. You can go out there and hit your home run, and I'll congratulate you when you're done.
That's excellent. Help me understand, and I know we talked about this earlier, this notion of news versus entertainment when it comes to the issue of fake news. Can you elaborate for us? Because I'm sure that's front and center and hotly criticized or contested in your world.
I guess the conflation of news and entertainment is in some ways a byproduct of things that have happened across media generally, not necessarily involving news per se. So if you look at reality television, for example, the use of something that purports to be someone's sort of real life at that moment experience, when we know that it has in some ways, let's say, been curated, right, for television, has created some confusion in the marketplace about what's real and what's not. What is reality television? It's not a documentary, right? so if it's not a documentary, then how much of what we're viewing should we accept as being the truth in the way that the people who are appearing on the screen operate and live their lives? I think the same sort of thing applies when you're looking at it from a news angle. You have pure factual reporting, but then you have sort of this mix of reporting and opinion, and in some cases, some entertainment as well. So if you look at your morning news shows, they really run the gamut, right? From being that strict, you're getting strict reporting in certain parts of the show. You're getting sometimes some very directed opinion, especially if you watch sort of the Sunday morning talking head shows. They've got various people there giving their gloss or their interpretation of the facts off of the news. And then you have, sort of some of these things that are just sort of like puff pieces, or they're straight out entertainment. You have people performing, et cetera, so on and so forth. When you combine those things together, it is important for the audience to be able to discern what they're experiencing and when they're experiencing it. And when that becomes unclear, I think you leave yourself maybe susceptible to some of these fake news allegations. But it's really not fake news. It may be opinion. And as long as it's opinion in opinion's clothing, there's nothing fake about it. There may be entertainment, but as long as it's entertainment in entertainment's clothing, there's nothing fake about it. I do think, though, that it has given an opportunity for those who want to go after news organizations or to go after maybe not news organizations, but individual people to make these allegations about fake news. But I think at the root of it all, it's not a fake news issue. It's a labeling issue. And I think that most news organizations get it right.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. So I wanted to get your take on a subject, being that you're a woman, professional in even the legal industry. Let's talk about some words that you mentioned that you actually don't care for. Work-life balance and this notion of being a mom. Can you elaborate for us and my listeners kind of your take on that and your perspective?
I just think that the words work-life balance in and of themselves create pressure and a standard that's impossible to live up to. I don't think as a salaried professional that you can view your life really effectively in terms of work-life balance if what you mean is that you're devoting a certain number of hours per day or a specific number of hours per week to your work and the rest to your life, or vice versa. I don't think it's realistic, and I think it causes anxiety even though maybe it's not intended to. I tend to look at things more from the perspective of being fully present with whatever it is I'm doing. So I try to be fully present at work and get through my work and then give myself the opportunity to be fully present at home. And the reason that that's so important to me is in most cases, when folks are discussing work-life balance, they begin discussing things like working from home and alternative arrangements and whatnot. And again, I think that a lot of that can create more anxiety than it solves if not approached in the right state of mind. Because if the thing that you think will help you achieve work-life balance is taking work home with you, I think that that's not particularly helpful. If the thing that you perceive as helping you with work-life balance is that, you're out of the office, but you've got your laptop with you on vacation, I don't think that that's particularly helpful. So the way that I look to balance myself is, again, through this concept of being fully present. I take vacations very seriously. So if I'm on vacation or someone on my team is on vacation, I make it a point to not contact that person with business matters unless it is absolutely, positively necessary. I don't expect that person to be checking their emails on a regular basis unless when they leave on vacation, they know that there is something that's sort of in a critical state and they need to be able to monitor that. For myself, I have a rank and hierarchy on communications. And if I'm on vacation and someone has an emergency, and I expect that it'll be an emergency if I'm being contacted, then they know to call me because I will always answer my cell phone, even when on vacation. And if it's something that's not particularly important, but they want me to know it, then they should email me, because usually on vacation, I will check just emails generally so that I know what's going on from time to time. But I don't necessarily respond. I'm really only going to respond and take my attention towards whatever that thing is if it is urgent. I try to model that for my team. I've modeled it for my team at previous jobs with a lot of success. And I'm really, really hoping that my team, sort of feels capable to do that under my leadership here at BuzzFeed. It's a reason why I also feel very strongly about having interoperable teams so that people can cover for one another, so that when someone takes a vacation, it truly is a vacation. It's not just them sitting on the beach in Fiji with their laptop. That's not a vacation.
No, it's not.
So, that's a really important issue for me.
That's excellent. Hi, friends. This is Chris Batts. I wanted to take a moment and say thank you for listening to this podcast. I really appreciate you, and right now I need your help. I would love to hear your feedback. Please share your ideas on who I should interview and what are the topics that interest you right now. I have 2 easy ways for you to share. Number 1, text the phrase LFL podcast to the number 44222. That's LFL PODCAST. Or by clicking the Give Feedback link to the show notes on your device. Again, I would love your ideas on who I should interview and topics that interest you the most. Please take a moment and do this now. Thank you, everyone. And now back to the show. Let's talk about a subject that I know that is very personal and near dear to your heart. So with some of the major trends that have been happening because of incidents occurring with Harvey Weinstein and then many of the movements that have followed him, the Kavanaugh hearings, would you please share with my audience just the perspective and the reality of you being a woman of color in a professional environment that's mostly white males? What's life like for you right now? And especially, so seeing things change over, several decades and what's happening right now. And then I'll just also say that you're in the content world. So that's unique with the hashtags that are going on, Me Too and Time's Up. Mm-hmm. Could you just share your perspective with my audience about what's been happening?
Sure. So I am incredibly encouraged by the increased willingness and ability of women to speak out on issues of sexual harassment in the workplace, and men, quite frankly. This is not something that's completely confined to women, and we've learned about several men who have experienced issues of sexual harassment in the workplace, but I will say that it is an area in which women dominate in terms of the number of victims. So I'm very encouraged by that. I do very firmly believe that women of color underreport this type of behavior. And I think that is because even though we've had a number of women step forward, a lot of the women who've stepped forward, number one, are fairly powerful women in their own right. And the second is that I still don't think for women of color, they feel that there is a safe space. And I say that because there are assumptions that are made, I think, about women of color, Black women in particular, that operate and militate against wanting to come forward and make this type of allegation. And one is very historical. The hyper-sexualization of Black women in American history is a big issue. And, right or wrong, coming forward with an allegation of sexual harassment, I think sparks in a lot of Black women the feeling that they will not be believed, that there is something sort of floating beneath the surface there that would create assumptions that Black women who are coming forward with this are people who invited this type of attention. So I think that that's part of it, and that's a very, very difficult thing to overcome. I think another piece of it is that in corporate America, even though you do see much, much greater success in terms of women moving into executive level positions in corporate America, when you look at Black women, the same level of success has not been had. And I think that that's true generally for women of color, that they're just very, very few in number. So there are fewer people to sort of step forward and provide that visual for other women of color of the person who has stepped forward to support them and sort of hold their hands through this process. It's not to say that the fact that white women have stepped forward is completely irrelevant, but we all know the influence and the power of having someone who looks like you do or say something. And I think until that happens with greater frequency, we still will have underreporting amongst women of color generally.
Do you think what happened with the Kavanaugh hearings should have happened the way it was?
I was aghast at the Kavanaugh hearings, but not surprised.
Yeah.
Right, because we have a model for what happened there. We have the Anita Hill model, and even though I would say the behavior, the outward behavior might have been modestly improved, the outcome and the inferences were the same. I would say that if the victim in that case had behaved in the same way as Judge Kavanaugh had behaved, she would have been run out of the hearing room. And she would have been portrayed as a hysterical type of person who could not be relied upon for any sort of factual information that, maybe she was hallucinating, this was all in her head. And instead, you had this very composed, though clearly shaken, but very composed doctor, PhD, sharing her story with an incredible level of detail and presenting that to a group of, I believe, with the exception of one, maybe entirely white men, and still being treated with such disregard. It was very, very, very disturbing to me.
Rhonda, for my listeners, both executives in law firms and corporate legal departments, what advice would you give them to create a culture that would allow people to talk about these things instead of hide them? What advice would you give them, whether they're men or females? And it's amazing the influence of a GC over a corporation, especially obviously from the liability standpoint. There's a lot of coaching needed. But can you share insights that you would provide?
Well, the first thing that I would say is that communication and the ability to have open communication in any organization is key. And that's true from a preventative standpoint, and it's also true from a addressing matters that come up standpoint. It's all about your communication, and it's the communication with men and women. One of the things that I am very, very concerned about is this feeling of backlash that men are encountering that's causing them to withdraw from full participation in organizations. It's causing them to not want to put themselves in situations with peers or subordinates or even their bosses for fear that, maybe something that I say or do is going to be misconstrued. So it's really about the communication and the understanding and having folks share sort of what are you bringing to work in the way that you even interpret your interactions? Because I do think that some things are a thing and some things aren't. And there has been some conflation of everything being sort of alike. So the remark that maybe was mislaid or misinterpreted or maybe even inappropriate in the context, being aligned with the behavior of Harvey Weinstein. Clearly, these are not the same things. And it's when we engage in that conflation that we start to get into a dangerous territory and undermine the cohesiveness and the community that we're trying to create in our organizations. I think it's so much about talking. I think that here at BuzzFeed, our HR department does an excellent job of making conversations happen. I hope that in my group that I'm doing a good job of just making conversations happen, and not just conversations about what constitutes and doesn't constitute sexual harassment. I mean, just conversation, getting to know your peers, getting to understand your peers and your direct reports and your bosses. That is what really lays the groundwork for eliminating some of what has happened in the past. Because when you actually know someone and you feel like you can have a genuine conversation with someone, you're less likely to either misinterpret something that they say that might be errant, or you're more likely to call them on something that they may say or do that might be misinterpreted or errant, and to feel comfortable doing it. I think that that's really the key. I'm very encouraged by sort of the generation behind us, my kids' generation, because I do feel that they feel comfortable saying more and sharing more and being assertive. But I also believe that that's because it's interesting because, we've studied so much and said so much about how social media and technology can be detrimental to building the social contract. But I think in some ways it has helped because folks now communicate to one another like immediately. You get immediate feedback when you're texting and, posting and whatnot. For better or for worse, you're generally getting immediate feedback on whatever it is you've said or done, which helps you get an understanding for where you can or cannot go. And if they're bringing that into their work world where, at least for now, we're interacting a lot more often in person, but if they're bringing that sort of immediate feedback into the work world, I think that it will help stave off some of the, particularly the more egregious abuses that have happened in the past.
Rhonda, let's talk about for a moment, you had shared a little bit. So you brought up the notion of kids. Let's talk a little bit about the trends that you're seeing for children or for kids and them stepping into their authentic selves. You said that you're encouraged by your kids' friends group. You use the words like empathy and sympathy. Share a little bit more for my audience what you're noticing there and the trends that are happening. And I mean, you get to see it within such a large media company that you're a part of too. So help us understand.
Absolutely. I do think that there's a much greater empathy and sympathy for those who were formerly thought of as being on the outside looking in and marginalized. And I think that's because social media creates a larger universe and allows you to maybe find like-minded folks who are not in your high school or living next door to you or something of that sort. So while there is a clear downside to technology and social media, and a lot of time has been spent talking about bullying and whatnot, which does happen with disastrous effect on social media, the opposite is also true. Social media has enabled folks who were otherwise felt to be sort of left out of the social contract to be brought into the social contract. And I've seen that with my very own children. I also would say that the evolution of particularly United States society for all of the concerns that we have, or that many people have, not everyone, but that many people have about the most recent political developments and the presidential election of 2016 and our, current president's behavior while in office, which has been to often stigmatize and single out specific racial minorities or ethnic minorities for ridicule and demonization, in spite of that, I think that the overall trend in our country continues to be one that goes towards inclusion, one that respects and welcomes diversity. I don't think we've lost that. And I think if you look at younger generations in the country, you'll see that we demonstrably have not lost that. It's very, very, very encouraging. My daughter goes to a school where there are not very many African-American children. It's a private school. There are not many African-American children. There are not many Latino children either. However, I would say that her experience has been one of building bridges, developing understanding. She has friends of every imaginable nationality and every imaginable religious background and no religious background from varying and sundry places across the state of New Jersey. It is really, really, really encouraging to see that, to see her flourish there, and to really be able to be a participant in her life and to watch her success. My boys both go to the local public high school, which is much more diverse than my daughter's school. But again, I look at their friendship groups, and their friendship groups are very, very diverse. There's no isolation of any kind. And I'm looking forward to this being sort of the model with which we see our world. My husband and I chose where we live in part because of the diversity, because we wanted our children to be able to grow up in neighborhoods and areas and have experiences about the America that we want to see. You know, how do you help create the world that you want to live in? And part of that for us was, okay, well, let's seek out a community that models that for us and models that for our children. And I'm very confident that my children will then go out and continue to model that throughout their lives.
I mean, that's admirable. I love the proactive kind of desire to be the change and to immerse your children in that. Rhonda, let's talk a little bit about your love to mentor younger lawyers and non-lawyers. Help my audience understand more of who you are and why you're doing this and who it's impacting.
Absolutely. I love mentoring, period. And I've mentored high school students and college students, law students, and lawyers. I think it's really, really, really important for those of us who've been in the legal profession for a while to really reach out, particularly to people of color who are interested in the legal profession, but not exclusively so, to reach out and help our new lawyers or soon-to-be lawyers to understand the power of the undertaking in which they're engaged. And I say the power because understanding not just laws themselves, but the process of legal evaluation, whether you're on the litigation side, the corporate side, the regulatory side, learning the law and learning about how the law is applied and how to effectuate change of whatever type through the use and observation of law is like learning another language. And you develop a much different and much deeper understanding when you study the laws of this country and of its states and local municipalities about what undergirds this society. You know, the review of the law really helps you understand how your society operates and why it operates in that certain way and what it prioritizes and what it does not. It also helps you understand how groups of people are differentiated amongst and why certain situations may be perpetuated throughout history, even though you may work with earnest, right, to change them. Your laws set in place a certain system that militates in favor of whatever that legal status quo is. And if you want to change that legal status quo, it is a tremendous and almost endless undertaking to do so. It's been done, as we've seen. We've observed some really amazing efforts that have resulted in very, very deep change in the way that this country does things. But it's not easy. Your legal system is the stability of your country. So if you're going to change it, right, it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of effort. I want lawyers to understand that. I want young lawyers to understand that they are so important to our desired outcomes in this country and in the world, quite frankly.
Rhonda, let's talk a little bit about, so you are a leader and you've been a leader within corporate legal departments, and it's obvious you just exude that kind of understanding and kind of knowing what to do. Can I ask you, what was formidable experiences for you in life to take you to where you are now?
Wow. So my sixth grade teacher told me at the beginning of the year that she felt that I should be valedictorian of the class. And at that time, I was a very, very, very good student. I was not the top student in the class. There was something about what she saw in me that made her make this statement. And I said to her, well, you know, I'm a good student. She said, yes, you are, but you could be the best student. So why don't you just do that? And I took that up as a challenge. And I worked really hard that year. And at the end of the year, I did wind up being valedictorian of my sixth grade class. That was an incredible, incredible experience for me. It enabled me to really have confidence and security in the fact that the things that I set my mind to, I really could do. It also impressed upon me how much other people thought I could do. I wasn't aware until that moment how really, really smart my teacher thought I was until she made that statement. That one experience really carried me through my entire middle school and high school career.
That's amazing.
And really was at the heart of why I chose a lot on my path, why I considered the colleges that I considered, why I went to Harvard and felt comfortable that I was going to succeed there, even coming out of a school that was described in many areas as an inner city school in Mount Vernon, New York, a public high school, but nonetheless a public high school that routinely sent kids to Harvard. I was neither the first nor the last student from that school to go. And I felt comfortable and confident when I got there. And I think in large part, it was because of that challenge that happened all the way back in sixth grade and the confidence that grew out of knowing I met the challenge. I did what I said I wanted to do. I did what I said I was going to do, and that I could continue to replicate that over and over again throughout my life. So I definitely hold on to that very closely. I hold on to some of the experiences I had in high school with English teachers and math teachers, and math was not my best subject, but having a calculus instructor who would not let me out of the class and told me that I was going to be very successful when I took the AP exam, and listening to her and that turning out to be the case. It was really very, very, very empowering. And I'm hopeful and hoping that young people today are having those types of encounters with teachers. I also attribute a lot of it to my father, who just had a limitless amount of support from me in everything that I tried to do, whether it was that I wanted to try out for the football team, and he said, you know, go for it, kid, although that did not end well. There was no limit. I don't have a recollection of ever being told, no, you can't. And that's unique. I'm finding that there are lots of people who have had limits put upon them unintentionally, right, by parents or teachers or others. I was so fortunate. I don't take it for granted, and I make sure that my kids understand There is nothing that you can't do. There are only things that you don't know how to do and things you don't want to do. It's not about you can't do. So that's really, really important.
Yeah, sounds like it. It's amazing. It's amazing the imprint that others can leave on us, both good and bad.
Absolutely.
Rhonda, share with my audience a little bit about family life. So share with them, I know you have twins and you have a younger child. Help us understand what you guys do to enjoy life away from work.
Oh, my goodness. I enjoy just hanging out with my kids and my husband. We are a fun family, although I would say that my husband is, sort of the comedian, and I'm still at home more of the coach. Okay. My kids try to get me out of that, and every once in a while I break down in silliness, which is, shocks and stuns all those around me. But when I'm having a good laugh, I'm really having a good laugh. My kids are very warm and they're very caring. And if there is one thing that I have striven for that I see has manifested itself in spades, it is that I have children who care about the world around them and the people within it uniformly. And, as a parent, I don't think that there's any greater joy than being places and having people say to you how wonderful your kids are. And I've had it said to me so many times. And I attribute their easygoing nature to their dad, but I say that the sort of the hard driving piece about fairness and justice for all comes from mom. Even though my husband works for the National Labor Relations Board and advocates on behalf of individuals and on a daily basis and has achieved some amazing, amazing things and amazing impact in his career as well.
You had mentioned to me that you are a reader, but it may not be a whole lot of books. What kind of sources of reading would you recommend for my readers to follow up on that you're reading these days?
Sure. Well, definitely read BuzzFeed news articles. I also, though, recommend, sort of that balance. I like a lot of lighthearted things as well. Okay. So I will read everything from Metropolitan Diary in the New York Times. I read some of our more fun listicle and quiz content on BuzzFeed. I do New York Times crossword puzzles compulsively.
That's great.
I do. I love them. I absolutely love them. It allows me to sort of get out of my own head and just do something for fun. Yeah. I like to read things about real estate. And then I love to read sort of like what I call beach novels too, things like the Shopaholic series. That'll get me really going. I've read all of the Bridget Jones books. I'm probably saying too much about myself. You can see that I do have another side. I also like to read books that my kids are reading.
That's fun.
While they're reading them. Because a lot of times they're a book that I've read before, but I haven't read it in 25, 30, 35 years. It's amazing what you bring to those books when you've had life experience behind reading them. And some of the books that they're reading are really serious, like, The Plague, The Bluest Eye. A number of them are really serious, but I really enjoy reading them with them and understanding how they're experiencing that book as a young person and then reflecting on how I experienced it then and what I'm experiencing in it now. And that's true fiction or nonfiction. I spent some time reading my daughter's American history book a couple of years ago, and I was amazed by it. Was it was an updated edition, but it was the same American history book that I had used when I took American History AP, and I was amazed by how I still connected with the book and the conversations that my daughter and I had around it.
Rhonda, I know you have some history in nonprofit leadership. What are you involved in right now, and why?
Sure. I'm on 2 nonprofit boards. I'm on the board of Power My Learning, which is an organization that has developed a proprietary technology that allows for communication through a a website, an application for parents, teachers, and students to work together on academic issues and to improve overall student performance at school. So that is an amazing organization. It's been written up in the Times, just a very, very forward-looking organization that has its program in several schools in the New York area and around the country. So I definitely encourage people to check out Power My Learning. The other is Food and Finance High School, which is a public high school here in New York City that has a full culinary program in addition to its academic program. And it prepares students for culinary or culinary adjacent careers while also preparing them for a, sort of standard college experience as well. So these students emerge from the school able to really take their own direction, whether it's 4-year college, 2-year college, culinary school, straight to the world of work with their food handlers and ServSafe and other relevant licenses. It really sets them up well, and it couples it with instruction on finance, particularly for those who are interested in culinary careers that may involve either restaurant management or opening their own culinary-related business. It's just a tremendous, tremendous high school where the graduation rate is well above the New York City average, with students who have won awards in culinary competitions that have enabled them to go to quite elite schools, including the Culinary Institute of America. So it's an amazing school, and I'm so privileged to be able to work with the board of directors there to try and subsidize and enhance the educational experience that those children have.
Rhonda, last question. What advice would you give minority attorneys entering the workforce?
I would advise them to reach out to seasoned attorneys, both within your chosen area of development and in other areas. I would encourage them to be forthright and steadfast in those things that they desire to achieve, and to set about doing that, and not to be afraid to ask for help. I think that all of us who have succeeded because we've had mentors and supporters and advocates, and no one does it alone. I certainly didn't do it alone. I could run lists of the people, both of color and not, who have supported me at every single step along the way in my career. And I am eternally grateful to each and every one of them. And in return for that, I try to do the same for others.
Rhonda, it's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's been wonderful.
Thank you, everyone who listened to this episode of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. If you have questions or would like to recommend someone to be on the podcast, please email them to podcast@findthelions.com. If you like this podcast, leave a review on iTunes. Also, please share our podcast with others via email or social media. To share our podcast, listen to more shows, or to read the transcription of this audio, go to liongrouprecording.com/podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. This podcast is for education purposes only. This content cannot be used for commercial use without written permission from the Lion Group. If you like this podcast, leave a review on iTunes.